Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. It's Wednesday, but unlike normal Wednesdays, we're not going to have a midweek mini mail call. I'm going to have something different. It's my first video kicking off the month of December, which is DOS videos, DOS PC videos, in the month of December. I am participating in this little thing, I guess, whatever you want to call it, with several other YouTubers. You'll be able to find a link to all of their channels in the description below. So if you like PC/DOS videos, please go check out and subscribe to their channels and watch for more of these videos. But on this video, it's a recording of a Zoom call that I participated in with several of the other YouTubers who are doing December, and we just kind of shoot the crap talking about PCs, our first DOS experience, and other interesting things. So I hope you enjoy this video. Let's get right to it. No intro, let's just jump right into the Zoom call.
Hello everyone to a random Zoom call thrown together at the last minute by all of us. Here you will find a whole bunch of YouTubers from all over the planet, and we're going to have a bit of a chat about DOS for the sake of December. And if you think that sounds a lot like Tandy, you're right, because it was from the same email discussion that we came up with December. My name's Jason, also known as Mr. Lurch, and I run a tiny little YouTube channel down here in Canberra, Australia. We're going to quickly go around the table, so to speak, and have a bit of a quick intro from each other and what our first experiences were for DOS. My first experience would have been when I was about, I'm guessing about 7 or 8 years old. We were always a Tandy Terrace 80 household. We had the Dick Smith System 80 and then I think a Model 3 and then a Model 4. But obviously even we kind of went, well, CP/M and stuff is kind of on its way out. We better get onto this whole DOS thing. And we ended up with a 286. It was a 286 EGA graphics, the usual kind of thing at the time. Although I wish I still had that EGA monitor. They're worth a bomb these days. And that was my first experience with DOS, my father sitting there for hours trying to squeak every last kilobyte of RAM out of the machine, and me being quite happy playing mostly the old Sierra games, things like obviously like Space Quest, King's Quest, and Leisure Suit Larry. So really, that's my kind of first experience with DOS. My father honestly did all the hard work, and I just got to play the games. But like I said, I was like 10 years old at the time. So that's my backstory. Josh, do you have something to add?
Yeah. So I'm Josh Malone. I go by 48K RAM online. I have a tiny little YouTube channel where I've mostly done stuff about Tandy 100 videos. But yeah, my computing at home got started with an Atari 400, and I had that up until about high schoolish, when we jumped right from the Atari 400 to an MS-DOS machine, a PC 386. So, I'd had Apple II machines all through school. When I got into the high school, though, you start to get into the more business machines. You have the typing lab, and that was all, full of IBM PS2 all-in-ones. So we got the 386 at home. It was ostensibly for my stepfather's business, but I don't think he ever touched it. And really, I just learned learn my way around DOS, learn my way around the computer. It's my first experience with PC type hardware, and took the thing apart and figured out how to add on to it, much to the fear of my parents. Then I moved on. DOS Windows sort of took all over the world. So that was my first experience with PC hardware. And I've been a big PC person ever since. And I work in IT, do lots of x86 hardware and servers now. A real important part of my computing history. I've collected a few PCs, a 386, a 486 that you see behind me. And I love DOS gaming. It's just a whole lot of fun.
Adrian, want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my first DOS experience, I was always a Commodore kid and then an Apple II kid growing up. And sometime in the 80s, it's probably around 1986 or 87, my parents decided they wanted a computer. So my stepfather went out and bought some IBM PC clone, and it was an XT class machine with monochrome. And I remember when he brought that thing home, He really, he's a musician, so he had no idea how to use that thing, not even in the slightest. So of course he came to me, can you help? And I, being the nerd kid, I had my VIC-20 when I was 7, and in 86 or so, I think I was 11. So, I was a few years into having used computers already. I could not make heads or tails of that computer. I think I took it apart. I tried to figure out, I opened it. Of course, that's what I do. But DOS, it was like a mystery to me. And being a clone, it didn't come with manuals. Like, of course, I'm sure if we bought a real IBM, it would have had the DOS books and everything with it. So at least I could have played around. I could not figure it out at all. And I remember going back to him and saying, like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Like, I just don't know what I'm doing with this computer. And so he ended up returning it, and he exchanged it for a Mac SE, a Macintosh SE, which I actually still have that exact computer today. But for a musician, which is what my stepfather was, he needed a machine to do a little bit of bookkeeping and also to help him with his compositions. And that was it for PCs. Like it never went anywhere after that until Dave, as in DaveJustDave, got a job in high school at a computer store. And he's like, hey, you should come work here. And he ended up getting me a job at that same computer store working after school. And of course, we were fixing PCs. That was like mostly what we were doing. And it was like trial by fire. Now, by then, Dave had already had a bunch of PCs, and I'll let him get into that. But he, I'm sure, told me plenty of things like, this is how you use DOS and whatnot. And I came up to speed pretty quickly. And of course, ever since then, now I have PCs all around me and I owned a whole slew of them, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure just like all of you guys. But yeah, my first experience was a bad one with PCs. And I can see why Macs were so popular back in the day.
I like that. Adrian's first experience with the PC is having it returned and went and got a Mac. Mr. Murray, 8-bit guy, over to you.
Hi. Okay, so my name's David. I run a modest little YouTube channel called The 8-Bit Guy. So my first DOS experience, well, I grew up a Commodore kid, and the interesting thing is my brother and I had to share a computer for, our early years. So from the time I was 6 to around the time I was 12, my brother and I were sharing, at first it was a VIC-20 and then later a C64. Well, of course, this created a lot of problems, as you can imagine, with two young brothers trying to share a popular piece of equipment in the house. So eventually, my parents said that I was around 12 one day. They're like, you know what? We're going to take you guys to Sears, and we're going to buy you both a brand new computer. And so we went, and I picked the Commodore 128D. And so that was my upgrade. And then my brother picked a laser MS-DOS clone machine for his computer, which I was really surprised by because he had always used Commodore machines. And I was, to be honest, quite a bit underwhelmed with it. I would watch him. He'd turn it on. He played Wheel of Fortune in all 4-color CGA glory with beep, 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 beep. And I just wasn't terribly impressed with it at the time, to be completely honest. But he did continue to upgrade it over the next few years, and he added EGA and eventually got a hard drive for it. And, I started to see that, okay, there are some more complex type games and things that you can do on an MS-DOS machine that I was not able to do on my Commodore. And maybe I want to say 3 or 4 years later, I ended up going to a PC myself. I got a 286 with VGA. And so that's kind of been my story.
David, do you remember, was the Commodore 128D more expensive or less expensive than the PC?
I don't know. It was probably pretty similar.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I guess on the PC you could run WordPerfect, and on your Commodore 128 you could run WordStar. And
I had GEOS 128 on my Commodore 128, so I was pretty impressed with that for a while.
Cool.
So obviously, your earliest experiences with DOS machines was looking over your brother's shoulder and kind of going, eh.
We all had Dave on this, DaveJustDave, he had a CGA computer, and I remember also thinking CGA graphics look so terrible. And I think at the time I had a 2GS, or I don't remember. So that original graphics, it really was not nice. I don't know.
Yeah. I've got to agree with that. When like I said, our first PC was a 286, but it had EGA graphics. But then a friend of my father's had some XT class machine. Oh, it It was actually an Amstrad 15, 12, 512, whatever it is, that model. Yeah, it only had CGA. And I remember going over there just kind of going, really? Really? And even to this day, I look at CGA and just kind of go, really? If you're going to choose 4 colors, why those ones? Actually, I'm sure 8-Bit Guy's CGA video probably explains why it is those ones. Okay, I'm going to hand the microphone over now to Mr. Retro Spectre, who's going to need to unmute himself. There we go. Quick intro and your introduction to DOS.
So I think I'm Dave. I run the hugely popular Retrospector 78 channel. No, I'm just kidding. Am I? I don't know. So my first MS-DOS experience was when I was about 18 years old, because I started out actually with Philips MSX home computer, then C64, then the whole Amiga thing. But when I was around 17, I finally got my first PC, which was actually assembled by a classmate of mine in school, so in high school. And one thing that I remember vividly is that, the first day I got it home, I got it installed, and I ended up deleting my config.sys or autoexec.bat, one of the two, and the thing wouldn't boot properly. And I was so convinced that I broke the entire computer at that point, so I had to return it. The guy had to fix it. And so that was like my first MS-DOS experience. So not too good, but yeah, I ended up using it a lot. I ended up selling my electric guitar at some point to get a 4 megabyte upgrade on the system, because it came with 4 megabytes. It had a 400 megabyte Caviar Western Digital hard drive. I vividly remembered that as well. Had a networking card, so yeah, I was pretty impressed with it. And ended up doing lots of stuff with it, playing games, but also doing some development, because I'm a software engineer. And even on the Philips MSX, I was always doing like basic programming, then on the C64 as well. And that kind of started my programming career. So yeah, that was my short introduction to MS-DOS.
Very cool, and probably not dissimilar to many others out there. I will now, I'm going to hand the mic over to fellow Australian, who's looking as bleary-eyed as I am, Mark from TheRetroChannel. He's going to go and play and screw around with his microphone.
Hey, it's really early for you guys. I give you props for coming. Thank you.
Yeah, fair enough. Reese, Mr. Ctrl-Alt-Rees, how are we this morning?
So my first experience with DOS, obviously, I think I'm a bit younger than a few of the other people in this group, if you don't mind me saying. But my first experience with DOS, I was probably 5 or 6 years old. My dad used to bring his work PC home at the weekends to work on, his sales reports and that kind of thing. He was a sales manager. Obviously, being British, it was an Amstrad 286. And I remember playing some early DOS games, like a platformer made by Apogee called Dark Ages. It's one of my sort of most vivid memories, and it's one that I've kind of recently rediscovered. I remember playing Wolfenstein 3D on it, which is absolutely fantastic. And when that PC was eventually decommissioned, it was the first PC that I took apart as well. I remember stripping the whole thing down and taking the hard drives apart and taking the platters out of the hard drive and everything, and having hours of fun with it as a sort of 7 or 8 year old. So yeah, and then we had an Atari ST for a bit. And then 1994, I think it was, we got our own home PC, which was a 486. Yeah, DOS 6.22, Windows 3.1. It's kind of set me up for a lifetime of DOS and Windows gaming that I'm still very much enjoying today.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm looking to say, okay, I've got a thumbs up from Mark. He's good to go this time. He's worked out his microphone issues. Mr. RetroChannel.
I hope it works this time.
Now we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, excellent. Hello, everyone. My name's Mark. I host the Retro Channel, fellow Aussie YouTuber, not too far away from Mr. Lurch, actually. My first experience with MS-DOS would have come from a 386 in the late 80s. I think it had EGA graphics, and it wasn't very impressive, but also at the time, I was going from a Commodore 64 to that, so there was a little bit of interest there. But eventually the family upgraded to a 486. I think it was a compact Presario DX 486 DX2, which I think ran at 66 megahertz, and that was just amazing. Obviously, the family bought it for us to do schoolwork and that kind of thing. So we did have Microsoft Encarta on CD-ROM, but things quickly turned to gaming. And I do remember one of the first real interesting games that we had was Stunts, which I think is also called 4D driving in some areas. The place where we bought it from, which was Dick Smith Electronics, which was pretty big in Australia at the time, they hadn't originally set up the computer properly, and it was missing the sound card, which it had a sound blaster in it, but they hadn't set it up properly. So once we figured that out and realized that it had a sound blaster, it was amazing going from PC speaker sound to the full sound blaster audio in Stunts. We were just blown away, and yeah, haven't really looked back since then. I guess, you know, DOS sort of fell by the wayside. So it'll be fun to actually rediscover some of this stuff and see what other people have got up to offer. So yeah, looking forward to December.
Very cool. All right. I will now hand the mic over to DaveJustDave. That's all one word, by the way. DaveJustDave.
Yeah, so yeah, look for the right channel when you look for Dave's channel.
Yes. Okay, so this is Dave from DaveJustDave. It's sad I have to append retro to the end of my name because there's another guy, and he totally doesn't like cops, and people get us mistaken all the time. So that wasn't me. In any case, my first MS-DOS experience, when I was growing up, I think it was a big sacrifice for my parents because we couldn't put food on the table. But somehow my dad picked me up like a clone XT machine. 640K, dual 360K floppies, CGA. It wasn't until years later I could discover that the little jack in the back can hook up to composite audio, which make it, you know, it looked a lot better. In fact, I have my very first copy of PC DOS. I didn't start with MS-DOS. I wasn't, you know, one of the cool kids. But this is what I had. And that machine, I think it carried me from elementary school through the beginning of junior high. I remember meeting Adrian, and he says, "Oh, does that machine have a hard drive?" I'm like, "No, there's no 3.5-inch floppy drive on this machine," because I had no idea what a hard drive was, because that's what all the rich kids had. So the only thing left from that machine today is I have the motherboard hanging on a wall somewhere, and the rest has been just long gone and just history by now.
Dave, what about that Sound Blaster that I have? Was that from that computer?
No. The Sound Blaster actually was my favorite, like, retro Christmas memory. I got it years later, and I remember writing a check to Sierra to order it, totally forgetting about it. And then 3 weeks later, this is way before Amazon Prime, right? 3 weeks later, it shows up at my door. I think the day before Christmas. I was never so excited. I killed that card because I routed the speaker outputs from my receiver to the microphone in, and that cooked it. And that card is now in Adrian's possession, and I think he's fixed it.
No, I forgot that the input was bad on it. There was a bad output channel, which I did fix, but I should probably pull that out. It's in my 286 right now downstairs. I should see if I could do a repair on it. That would be fun, actually.
That would be neat.
It's a cool card, too. It's a Sound Blaster 1.5 with the CMS chips on it.
Very cool. Noel, we might jump over to you if you would like to unmute.
Hi, everybody. This is Noel from Noel's Retro Lab, and I'm over here in Spain. Here, let me change that. Okay. So my first experience with MS-DOS, I actually started with an Amstrad CPC 6128. That was sort of my childhood computer. And then I got my first MS-DOS computer almost kind of like a random event. I entered an essay contest that Epson, like the printer brand thing that Epson was organizing. I think at the time they were starting to get into the PC clone or something market. And somehow I won that contest. And the prize for that, we actually had to go to Barcelona and whatnot. And the prize for that was one of the clones that they just made. So I remember this was like in 88, I think, or 89. But so it was like an 8086, like monochrome monitor. The thing that made it way better than anything that I had used before is that it had a hard drive. It had a 20 megabyte hard drive, which was like, wow, right? For me, it was kind of like a shock because I came from the Amstrad, very colorful. The main thing that I did in it was, apart from cracking games, I would actually I would be writing games and making games and whatnot. And so immediately I tried to make games with this. And it was just, like the assembly language, I like it from Z80 to 8086. Yeah, that's fine. That was pretty easy. But the graphics were pretty difficult to get my mind around it, especially because there were some things like I kept trying to do and I couldn't get them to work. And back then, it was like really impossible to get information about things. It turns out this had an MCGA video card. And I kept trying to do VGA things and some things would work, but some things wouldn't work. So it just had this weird video card mode. But I eventually figured it out. And that's actually what started me then. A few years later, I went to college, and then there I started building my own computer. So I built a 386 SX 16 megahertz, and with 40 megabyte, like double, right? The capacity, 40 megabyte MFM hard drive, and just went from there, building my own computers and stuff. But that was that little clone Epson that got me started, and it had MS-DOS 3.3, I think. That's what it started with.
Mark from MindFlareRetro, over to you.
The other Mark.
The other Mark.
Northern Hemisphere Mark. Like a lot of people here, I was a Commodore kid from early on as well. I had a VIC-20 back in the early 80s and then moved to a Commodore 64. And I was always a Commodore guy. And even from there, I moved into Amigas, and I used my Amigas. We're getting to the DOS part. When right through university even. And I had I'm not embarrassed to say, a real hate on for anything PC at the time. And then I had to get a job during the summer. And that place, it was a retail job, and it was a major, at the time, photo processing and related services retailer that was across Canada. And their whole retail payment system, the point of sale systems, and how the lab ran and how they organized all their stores were PS2 machines. So there was a huge tower server in the back, and all the individual tills were all PS2 machines. And everyone knew me as the Commodore guy or the computer guy. A lot of people there weren't computer savvy. So whenever anything went wrong, they're all looking at me, and I had no clue at all. So I remember actually taking binders home from the back room because they would install these tall tower servers, or I guess workstations. I'm not even sure if they were actual servers. We called it the server. And I would take the binders home from there and try to figure out how all this bloody stuff worked. And it wasn't until the mid 90s was my real first experience. And it was in a retail commercial environment. And I never actually I really stuck to my guns with my Commodores and never had a PC until Windows was out. And I ended up taking an intensive programming course that took 18 months. And I was forced to finally get a PC. So yeah, I didn't really tinker with DOS until I was forced to at my job. And even then it was not the greatest experience for me, but that was my first experience with it.
So, okay, thanks, Mark. So welcome to DOS Samba, where Mark had a terrible start to DOS.
And to this date, I don't have any DOS machines at home. So yeah, So expect a quality video from me in December.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, so for everyone watching this sometime in December, we're currently recording this on the, well, for some people it's the 28th of November, and for the rest of us it's the 29th of November. And so Mark has, he's got a few days to come up with, to go find a DOS machine.
I have a good track record for showing up on the last day or a few days before the deadline. So who knows?
Well, maybe people will donate. They just send you some machines, Mark, so you can get a video ready.
Okay. How about we all each pick a piece of hardware, send it to him, and then he can build his own MS-DOS machine.
Oh,
because if Mark and I post something today, he might have it for next DOS September.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true.
And at my speed of making videos too, it might be for next December too.
Yeah. Last but not least, for our round of intros, Mr. Jan Beta.
Okay, I'm Jan from Germany. I run the Jan Beta YouTube channel. And as many here, I was a complete Commodore kid, started with the Commodore 64 in 1987, and then worked my way up the ranks to an Amiga 500, briefly had an Amiga 1200, and then I had an Amiga 2000. And that's actually, my first DOS experience was actually on an Amiga. The Amiga had this expansion card, the A2088, I think was the name. And that was actually an XT PC that you could just put in the Amiga and basically run a PC in a window on the Amiga. That was, of course, not the highest spec machine. It was just an XT. And yeah, but I learned my first steps in DOS on that, definitely, and wasn't impressed, especially because since it ran in a little window on the Amiga, and the Amiga was just so much more powerful and so much more colorful and sounded so much better. It had a little beeper, actually. And then very, very much later, I hung on to the Amiga until 1997, I think, and used it for everything, for word processing and databases and everything. And then eventually in 1998, I started studying computer science, actually, briefly. Never finished that. And had to get a PC. And at that point, it was like a Pentium 150 megahertz, I think, with Windows 95. And I absolutely hated it, actually. And yeah, I thought it was just so... The Amiga system is just really clean and really straightforward. And the PC was just so filled with useless things, and you had to go into DOS every time you wanted to run a game or things like that, and had to figure out everything to configure the hardware that was actually in there. I found it really tedious, and I'm a Mac user now because I could never get used to Windows and DOS that much. Yeah. That's my story with the PC, so not a love story at all.
I was just going to say that expansion card for the Amiga 2000 would, if I don't know, are they even around anymore?
I have one actually. I was able to find one, and I'm currently rebuilding my old Amiga 2000. So might be an idea for DOS-Sember even. I don't know.
That would be a fantastic DOS-Sember video, actually, like a really good one.
Maybe I'm going to do that then.
Yeah, and at the time the bridge card was out that Jan had, there's also software emulation for DOS on the Amiga as well, and I have a copy of that. It's called Cross DOS or something. I don't know. Jan, do you know the name?
Yeah, but it's just, I think it's just for reading the discs, really.
Oh, no, the one I have has both, has a disc for that, and then another one that actually runs a full emulator, and I think it's incredibly slow.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Well, there was one called
that's interesting.
What was that, David?
There's one called PC Task that I used to run on an Amiga 500, which is software only, but it's really, really slow. But yeah, Cross-DOS, I think, just lets you read the discs.
Yes.
So I guess I really need to try running, and actually, Jan, you should do this on your bridge card, running David's Planet X3 on the software emulator on an Amiga. See how
that
slow
should actually work. Yeah.
It absolutely is.
Well, actually, the funny thing about Planet X3 is because I think David deliberately wrote it for real, not just low spec, like really low spec
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So it'd probably run okay.
Well, I don't know about
Actually,
David.
somebody has already posted on the Planet X3 Facebook group showing it running on an Amiga as well as an old Mac under software emulation, and it does work, but the sound doesn't come out right. I think the way those emulators work is they don't really emulate the timer on the sound chip exactly, so they just check it like every few milliseconds to see what sound is supposed to be there. And so because Planet X3 changes the tone like constantly for like the virtual 3 voices that it uses, it just kind of comes up all it doesn't sound right on the music and stuff like that. But the game actually plays.
That's cool. I'm gonna have to try, because I mean I know that on like an Amiga 500 it runs much slower than 4.77 megahertz equivalent. Yeah. So yeah, it'll be curious.
Well, that'd be kind of cool then. All right, so if Jan can pull out that card and get Planet X3 running, and then Adrian could jump in on that video and go, well, this is how it works under software emulation as well. So speaking of DOScember videos, what have I got planned? Well, funnily enough, because DOScember basically came out of Tandy. And the email conversation that was ongoing for that. The irony is that my main video for DOScember is actually going to be on a Tandy. Tandy 1000s really aren't that common here in Australia. I no idea why, but Tandy is a store. Sorry, and when I say Tandy stores, you guys will know them as Radio Shack stores. They were just called Tandy stores over here. They were big, but they were never as like widespread as Radio Shack ever was in America. And people were kind of buying by the time the PC age came around, people were buying their PCs from all over the place, not really deliberately going to Tandy to buy them. Yeah, they were just not that widespread. And we got a few of the like original Tandy 1000s. They're still not easy to find. But then the later ones, the other day, it was towards the end of September, it was early October, I got an email from someone, hey, I've got this dead Tandy EX, which just basically just don't exist in Australia. Was it EX or HX? It's a HX, because it's got the dual 3.5s in the front. And I'm like, does it work? He goes, I don't think so. Well, send it. I'll do something with it. I wasn't going to say no to it. Anyway, I obviously got it home, plugged it in, worked. And
they didn't have a monitor, probably, right, Jace?
I don't know, but because that thing's got composite out. I mean, he could have just plugged it into composite. And so my DOScember is going to be to throw actually one of I can't remember. Adrian, how do you pronounce Robert's last name?
Which Robert?
Robert,
who made the expansion card? I am not sure how to pronounce.
Right, no, I don't know. So, anyway, we'll just call him Robert.
Yeah.
Robert, who designed the 3-in-1 expansion card for the EX and the HX, managed to get hold of one of those. Okay, so I get this really bad habit of I get a machine in, I fix all the hardware, I get it up and running, 2 thumbs up, and I move on to the next one. I so rarely get a chance to actually sit down and enjoy any of the computers that I happen to put on the channel or fix or play with or whatever. And so I'm going to do my best this video to not concentrate so much on the upgrades and the hardware and all that kind of stuff, but actually spend some time actually enjoying the computer before I just move on to the next one. So yeah, that's my plans for DOScember. I'm going to pick a random other person that is in the call. I'm going to put them on the spot, because not everyone I know actually has a project. I know Josh has a maybe project if he actually gets himself organized. So Josh, what have you got planned?
Yeah, so I'm really, really excited about this actually, because I have 2 projects that I've been meaning to do for a while. The first one is this great big stack of parts here needs to become an XT IDE card for the 1400 LT. Speaking of Tandy, I'm also a big Tandy collector. And I have managed to acquire 2 Tandy 1400 machines, both in semi-working order. I have the rest of the parts in that thing to fix the power supply in the 1400 FD and the 1400 LT, but they have this weird slot in them, and it's in the back, and there's two slots. One takes a modem, and the other one takes this weird card that is basically ISA, but not really. And it has this ridiculous, you can only draw like 120, 130 milliamps from this slot and all sorts of craziness. But on Texelec has released or sells a PCB for what is basically an XT IDE card for the 1400 expansion slot. So this pile of parts back here is to build up one of those. I haven't ordered the PCBs yet, but I want to do that and get an XT IDE in both of my 1400s. And then on this original mailing list discussion, we went on to joke about so many other months, Genu Atari or whatever. By the way, I'm starting to feel like I'm the only Atari kid on this call, and I really don't feel seen in this Commodore crowd.
Absolutely not the only Atari kid on this call. Don't worry. I'll show you some of my collection. I'll show you some of my collection in a minute if you want.
So just one little piece of trivia that I wanted to throw in there about the Tandy 1400 is, I had one of those and it kind of died, and I actually gave it to Kevin at Texelec, and he used it. He's tried to fix it up, and he used it to test that card that you're getting.
Well, I think the PCB is actually a low-tech design, isn't it?
It is, yes.
But but obviously has to be adapted for the special slot that's in there.
Well, the
slot that's in the back is essentially an ISA, but done weird. It's a bit like the expansion ports in the EX and the HX. You know how they're basically ISA? Same kind of idea.
Yeah, it's all based on the low-tech design. It may have been heavily adapted by the Texelec guy whose name is escaping me, even though you just said it, David.
Kevin.
Yes, thank you. So I'm excited about that. As we're joking around on the month names, we were trying to decide, is it DOScember or is it December?
So you got a bit of both.
Why not both, right? So this is my digital PC 433 SE. This was a fairly recent acquisition of mine, and I've forgotten that I even had it. And it's pretty nice. It's got the little trackball built in here, and PCMCIA slots. And the thing about this is it's fully configured. It's got all the card services. It's got a really nice Windows 3.1 install. No fun applications from where it came from before. I think it did just really boring office tasks. But what I want to do is get that sucker reconfigured for compact flash hard drive. So I've one of those 2.5-inch parallel ATA to compact flash adapters, and then I want to get the hard drive on it cloned over onto this CF card and see if I can actually make it work, because I don't have any of the original media that was used to install it. I don't think I could reinstall the nice configuration that's on this machine. So I want to see if I can do a hard drive copy onto a compact flash and get this thing up and run a little quieter, because the hard drive in it's a Seagate, and it is really incredibly loud, as we all remember from the days of early PC hard drives.
Can you show me that laptop again? I think I looked at that and I'm like, yeah.
OEM or something?
AST?
So we used to sell, again, I used to work at AST. We had a laptop that looked exactly like that called the AST Bravo NB. I used to do tech support on it. I was sitting there looking at that going, that looks so familiar. So I had to pull a picture up on the internet to double check it was the same thing. And it is. It's the exact same machine. You might even throw that in some trivia as you're when you make a video on that.
So do you think it was made by AST, or is it actually made by Digital?
It probably wasn't made by either one. It was probably made by Quanta or one of the other Hong Kong or Taiwan companies, and probably branded for both. It's like a 486, 25 or 33 or something like that.
Yeah, it's a 486 33, and I'm 100% certain that DEC did not make this. No. Yeah, I completely agree. It was made by whoever AST's OEM was. Yeah, Quanta would be my best guess as well.
That's funny. That sort of reminds me, and actually, JC, you were talking about how Tandys were so hard to find, the Tandy 1000 line in Australia. And I wonder if that was because with the proximity of Australia, obviously, to Asia, that there was a much easier access to all of those clone machines that were coming out of Asia at that time, which probably you were like, well, I could buy this Tandy 1000 for whatever, $2,000 Australian, or this one from Hong Kong for half the price. And I wonder if that's what happened specifically.
Well, that's entirely possible, because I mean, back in like the 90s and stuff, I don't even remember. Can't think of anyone who actually had a brand name computer of the people that I knew. A lot of even like all small to medium sized businesses all used white box computers. No one used, the only people that used brand name computers were, there's only two people that use brand name computers. One was either big business and government, right? Because you got the service and the warranty and all that kind of stuff with it. People who didn't know any better, which is basically that was it. You know, so, and it's probably, that's a good point. It's probably because it was so much easier to get and cheaper, a lot cheaper, to get a clone machine, being so much closer to Asia. So yeah, that.
Well, you know, I could even agree with that. I mean, that's kind of the way it was around here too. Everybody that knew anything about computers built their own out of parts because it was cheaper usually to do that. But that changed, I want to say, like after the 2000s, it actually got to the point where it was actually more expensive to build your own than to buy one that was already manufactured together. So
there was a massive hobby industry of computer builders, like, just backyard builders, but they were everywhere. Everyone knew one. So you just didn't go to Myers or Grace Brothers or any of the big department stores to buy a computer. Everyone knew someone who built one. Everyone.
Yeah.
And I think there were a lot of shops that did this too. I can remember very clearly when we went to get our first machine, and then when I got the machine I took to college, we went to a store. I remember it was literally called Clone Land. That was the name of the store. And that was the easiest way to get a good computer in this town here, was to go to one of these full service PC builders, and they'll give you exactly what you want. You're trying to find something that you wanted in a department store, or, other than Radio Shack, I don't know where else we really would have gone to buy a computer here, but one of those type, specialty stores. And it was pricey. It was the last time that I bought a fully assembled tower. After that, I built my own machine. I built machines for other people in college, but I distinctly remember, I think I remember where the store was here, but it was called Clone Land. It's just like, no, we're not even gonna, it's just no flashy name.
Yeah, we're not even pretending.
I think as a lot of people have said on this calls, especially back then, PC experience was pretty bad, compared to the competition, right? Macs and even the Commodores, Amigas, and Ataris. But once the clones came on the market, and if you lived in a place that had ready access to those parts, you could buy and build computers so cheaply. And Dave and I grew up in Southern California, where there are tons and tons of importers there from Asia. That's where a lot of stuff into the US comes straight into Southern California. So there were just endless shops, just like what you guys were talking about, that you could buy every part under the sun you wanted for such cheap prices, not to mention the swap meets and everything, which I'm sure everyone had access, a lot of people had access to. But that was sort of the tipping point, I would say, where PC explosion, even though the experience sucked, you could just get stuff so cheaply and keep upgrading it, which you couldn't do with your Commodore 64 or your Amiga as easily.
Well, and the other big thing that changed, once you got all these clone makers and cheap imports and everything, and it just drove the price of PC computers right down. That was also really the birth of companies like Dell, HP, and I think AST as well, that they realized that there was no money there's no money in the box, right? They couldn't make money on the actual computer. The only place they could make money was on the servicing and the support. It's even right today. You go order a Dell, and I guarantee you Dell are making about 3 cents on that computer. What they're making, where they're getting their money, is the service and support and everything from the big businesses they deal with, governments and huge organizations and things like that.
I don't know about the service and support thing, but in fact, it may have changed. But I know, like, if you go back to the early 2000s, when the price just fell out of, the bottom fell out of the prices on the PC market, the thing that PC manufacturers were making money on was including all the bloatware in their computers. Yeah. That's where they were making money. And I don't know that practice is still, because I've only bought Macs for like the last 10 years, so I don't know what the PC market's doing these days. But yeah, that was getting to the point of absurdity where you'd buy a computer and it'd have so much bloatware and trial software on
You'd have
there.
spend, yeah, you spent like an hour just uninstalling all the garbage.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Just
the
did that with
shovelware.
my wife's machine.
Yeah, let's run through some of the classics. McAfee had to be there.
And you could
Right,
barely get it
everything-
off. Yeah,
and
it
you
was
could
like-
barely get it off. What was the Lotus equivalent to Microsoft? Well, it wasn't even Microsoft
Oh.
Office. Microsoft Works. What was the Lotus version
the
of that?
Corel.
Smart
the-
Suite.
Oh, and also the Corel stuff. All those Corel.
Yeah,
Word
that was
Perfect.
always there. Even put it this way, even in Australia, we used to get the AOL bloatware.
Yeah, that's true.
That's hilarious.
Real
That was
Media.
Well, the fu-
Remember all the Real Media stuff?
Oh yeah.
Real audio.
Now, Josh, you were
Yeah.
just saying I recently got like a Lenovo something or other laptop, and I got to say it had very little stuff on it. It had only maybe an antivirus suite on there. I don't even think it had that though. So it seems like some manufacturers are getting away from that horrible tactic that everyone was doing. Like David said, it was.
I just bought a phone yesterday, and it came full of bloatware. And I had to uninstall a bunch of stuff. So
The
they haven't
bloatware
stopped.
market, like everyone else, they've gone mobile.
Well, they've gone mobile and they've gone Android.
Yeah. No,
Well-
it was not that bad. This was an HP machine, and there were only a few things on there. It was not nearly as bad as it was in the 90s and the 2000s. That was, yeah, you weren't kidding. You spend an hour uninstalling software.
Or you literally just did a fresh install of Windows
Yep,
from start.
That's what I did.
It was quicker.
Format
Yeah.
C.
Yeah, it
Format.
usually ended up being quicker.
And I got to give Apple credit. You know, like, I mean, I'm not a huge Apple fan, but, you know, were a huge proponent, right, of not putting a bunch of crap on there. Although I guess when you buy a Mac, you still get a lot of their software, which, to be honest, I uninstall off Macs because I don't need GarageBand and other stuff like that on my computer.
Yeah, but the difference is with all that kind of stuff is it wasn't running at boot. I mean, you know, it wasn't chewing up resources.
Popping up on your screen constantly.
Yeah, trying to get
You
you to
can
buy
just
the full
delete it,
version
so-
because
Yeah.
you already have the full version.
That's a good point. Yeah,
That's
not like
exactly
renew
right.
your subscription to our crappy antivirus software.
Yep, that's exactly right. Right, let's try and bring this back on schedule just a little bit. Who else has got a video planned? Because I know not everyone has a video planned for December. I know we've just made Jan Beta's decision for him. Jan's going to be
I
doing.
had another thing planned, actually.
Not anymore. You don't.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
I just
Um,
thought of one actually.
yeah.
I had nothing planned, but I did think of something just now because you know I really like these kind of Arduino thingies, you know, Internet of
Yeah.
Things, and doing development on that. And I was kind of wondering how would that have looked like in 1981 or 1982 on an IBM PC XT, you know, with limited memory, with limited hardware interfacing capabilities. And I think I have this old digital to analog or analog to digital converter card, ISA, that should be compatible with an XT. So I'm thinking about doing something with that, like doing some old school development on an IBM XT to have like a blinking LED or something more fancy on that.
Oh, okay. No, I got you. Yeah. Well, actually, that actually brings up using modern single board computers. I don't know if you. Okay, so there's a Raspberry Pi distro called Amibian. I think most people are probably familiar with it. It's the pre-rolled Amiga emulator distro. And then there was a spin-off of that called Combian, which is actually the one that I think that was the one I used actually in my very first YouTube video, which was a horribly shot thing. Unfortunately, it's still my most viewed video, so I'm really loath to delete it. But anyway, the guy who did Combian actually has recently started doing DOSbian. And yes, it's basically DOSBox pre-rolled into a Raspberry Pi distro. So that'd be, if anyone's struggling, that could be something interesting to maybe have a poke at. If anyone's struggling for ideas.
Yeah, I know. What's that? The FPGA system? Oh, Mister, right?
Mister.
That has a 46 core, and when I first got my Mister, that was terrible, I thought. But someone was telling me that core is really improved now and much better. So That might be worth taking a look at as well.
It absolutely has. The performance has increased quite a bit, and you can find some really nicely configured images on archive.org to boot that thing into. And I think it's a lot easier now to get the serial port set up so you can do stuff like BBSing from it. I'm a big Mister fan.
I love that thing for everything else, but I just found that core was relatively inconsistent and sort of poor originally, at least.
Well,
It's still not amazing, right? It's called AO 486, and people say it gives you the performance of actually more like a high-end 386, even though it has some of the 486 instructions. But there's still room for improvement, but it runs good stuff. It's not bad.
well, there you go. Anyone with a mister who's struggling for an idea for December? We're just coming up with ideas all over the place. Reese, have you got anything planned?
I have, yes. As you can see, I got my old IBM 5150 out of storage today. So I actually imported this from the US maybe 2 years ago now. Wasn't working, had a RAM fault, so I replaced all the RAM chips. Quite a few interesting upgrades. It's got a network card in there. It's on my home network, so I can sort of FTP stuff to and from my NAS. So I kind of wanted to cover all of that. It's got an overclocking board installed called a PC Sprint, which is something I've already made a video on for the VCF. They were doing 5-minute videos on stuff 6 months or so ago. So I kind of wanted to cover that as well. So kind of almost like an LGR type thing, I guess, kind of have a look inside, have a look at some of the software that's on there and that kind of thing. So I think hopefully that should be interesting for people.
The good old 5150. Very nice. It's actually a machine I've struggled. I've got bits and bobs for one, but it's actually a machine that I personally, I've actually struggled to kind of get together as one whole unit.
I had the keyboard and the graphics card for years before I actually got my hands on one, and I just couldn't find one in the UK. So yeah, kind of ended up paying well over the odds to have it shipped over, which was, I don't regret it.
Has it had a 240 volt? Is it running through a step down, or have you got it now running on 240 volt?
No, I run it through a step down transformer.
Okay, fair enough. No, that makes sense.
Didn't IBM actually manufacture a lot of those machines in Scotland as well?
Ireland, I think.
All right, yeah, like it's so weird. They're so hard to find because DaveJustDave on here. Is your machine made in UK as well?
Yep.
One you have?
I was just going to say that it says that right in the front. I had gotten one of those new old stock 5170s maybe about 3 years ago, and there's a little paper label right in the front.
Didn't IBM also manufacture a bunch of their stuff in Adelaide?
Yep. I was just about to jump in and say that. Yeah, they had a manufacturing plant in South Australia.
I guess like they were all business-owned machines and they threw them away when they were out of end of service or something.
I think
that's exactly it.
Because Amstrad was so much cheaper over here, they were just being undercut by Amstrad, and they're absolutely everywhere. But you just don't see the IBMs in the UK.
I was actually curious what everyone thinks about this idea, but I was, it's sort of hard to find certain kinds of machines like you guys are talking about. One of the reasons I was thinking is that when a business is a predominant user of a machine, and take Silicon Graphics machines as an example, when those are end of life, they just get scrapped. And yeah, it seems like in the countries where I've always felt that it's the home users that are more likely to put stuff back in a box, stick it up in their attic or in their basement or in their closet or wherever, and that you find them nowadays. So if you happen to live in a country where it was all business use, it's almost impossible to find.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the story with this. So there's a very, very Australian computer called the Micro B, which I've mentioned to Adrian in the past, and some of you may be familiar with it. But yeah, 99.9% of those went into schools. They were basically an education machine. And so, yeah, once the schools were finished them, they just ended up as landfill, all of them. And I've heard stories of people seeing literally pallets of Micro Bs just being sent to landfill. And you look at it now and you just kind of like, it almost makes you want to cry, especially considering how much a Micro B goes for these days on eBay or whatever. And there was pallets of them that just went.
Yeah, Apple IIs in the US, obviously Apple II was used in schools, but a lot of people had those at home too. So you have that lucky fact that they're still very plentiful and easy to find even if the school ones were all trashed, just like you were talking about, Jace.
Yeah. Well, it used to be, in the late 90s or early 2000s, you would sometimes get lucky, right? You would find a school that they're not going to use them or something, but they're also too lazy to scrap them. So they just wind up in a warehouse. And then the late 90s, early 2000s, suddenly they opened this warehouse, and oh my goodness. And every now and then you ran across one of those. I actually wound up working for the local school system after I graduated high school here. They were doing the first physical inventory in like a decade and a half. And they were just like, that kid right there, he knows what all this stuff is. And so I went around to every school and located all this stuff on this huge printout. But afterwards, yeah, they wound up with all this stuff that they got rid of. And I helpfully advised them on how to get rid of that stuff, and they basically paid me in hardware. So that's how I wound up with Apple II stuff, and I missed an opportunity to pick up a Kangaroo, an Outbound Systems Kangaroo, which I'm not a Mac collector, but man, that would be a nice thing to have, an early Mac laptop clone. But I think those days now, all those caches of machines have now finally been purged. It's very sad.
Well, I was going to throw an anecdote about the Apple II thing. I don't know how true or how widespread this is, but I did read an article a few months ago talking about that Apple made these special deals with these schools that to use their computers. And in many cases, it was free computers or highly subsidized computers. And the deal was the schools were not allowed to sell them or get rid of them, right? And of course, they probably weren't thinking about this long term, but that's what the deal said. So a lot of these schools, when they retired them, they just stuck them in a warehouse or in a back room somewhere in a big pile. And I understand, according to this article, there are still schools today that have like a back room just stacked to the ceiling with old Apple IIs or early Macs that they legally can't get rid of, because of these deals. And again, I don't know how true or how widespread that is, but yeah, there could be huge amounts of them out there just stashed away that we haven't found yet.
That does sound like something Apple might do, right? So I don't know. Wow. Well, I have a Commodore PET here, 4016, and it has Portland School District scrawled across, engraved in it. So this was some machine that someone had picked up at one of those clearing out the warehouse auctions at some point, I guess. Not me.
Well, yeah, I posted some photos recently. I think it was on Twitter, but also on Telegram of an Apple IIe I've been working on. And the only comment I got on all of them was for the epic engraving that's along the top. It's got ACT School Department or something like that, like engraved, like thick.
That I've never seen an engraver like that. Like Jason's picture, it's literally like someone took a chisel and just like chiseled a huge and it's all huge letters across the bottom.
I'm surprised it's thick enough where you start going, put it this way, there can't be much between the bottom of the lettering and the inside of the case.
No, it's like 2 millimeters deep, it looks like.
It's like they went at it with a hot soldering iron or something.
That's right. That's exactly right, Josh. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, you'll see that video. You'll see that machine in a video probably this week anyway. Who else has got a video planned for December? Mark, have you got anything? Retro Channel Mark?
Yes, I do have something planned. I've actually don't have a proper DOS machine set up, so I'm actually going to be looking at DOS emulation, which basically means DOSBox, specifically DOSBox X. So yeah, I'm going to run through sort of how to set that up, what its quirks are, and obviously show off some games as well. But I've found so far in general, it's actually really easy to set up, and the compatibility is quite high. So I'm really looking forward to that. And it'll really sort of help out anyone who doesn't have a DOS machine handy that still wants to experience the, the DOS games or even just play around in the command prompt. So yeah, that should be coming out probably, I'd say mid-December by the time I get my shit together. But yeah, that's the plan. I do also have a Commodore 386 laptop that I recently picked up, but it's a bit too late to do anything on that. So that'll probably be early next year.
It's funny talking about DOSBox. DaveJustDave, I know you've done a lot with DOSBox on Android phones, right? Don't you have one of your phones has a keyboard on it? It's like a perfect little portable emulation device. That might be interesting to show if you haven't already. I can't remember.
Yeah, I made a video on that. It was a Droid 4, so one of the last few Android phones that had a keyboard. And it handles it okay. It emulates a whole bunch of other stuff as well. But for my series of videos for December, I was thinking a couple of things. I was going to try to run DOS, I think, as close to bare metal as possible on modern hardware, and maybe even on a Pi. There's a couple of distributions. I mean, I'm not sure if it still does some sort of emulation in the back end, but they kind of cut out a lot of the Linux in the middle, so you can boot right into DOS. So I'm going to be playing with some of that on a Pi. And then someone had made a JavaScript DOS interpreter. So I was going to do a little programming on that, so you can get JavaScript stuff running on an MS-DOS machine. And then if I have time, I'm going to wrap it up. You can see in the back, you can see my 5170. So I got this new old stock like several years ago, and people complained because I completely bastardized it. So Adrian had burnt me a set of ROM chips, which swapped out the IBM ROMs so I could run IDE on it. And now everyone's like, oh, it's not really an IBM anymore. So I'm going to be converting it back. I'm going to kind of make it period original. I'm going to put some original IBM hardware in there. And then I'm going to go SCSI because I still need, better storage on that machine.
Actually, Dave, it's funny you were just mentioning the bare metal, and that Lenovo laptop I recently bought is a Ryzen. I don't know, it's last year's model, but I actually tried running DOS on it natively. Like I basically put the BIOS out of EFI into legacy mode, and it booted DOS. Actually booted natively on this 2019 laptop. But one thing that was really interesting, and I thought about making a video, but I never did, is it seems that ATI or AMD, I'm sorry, who made the processor and the graphics chip, they took out all of the legacy emulation modes. So it no longer supports CGA or EGA anymore. When you try to run a game, it runs, but the graphics, it just stays in text mode, and it's kind of, you get garbage on the screen, but the game is actually running in the background. And I was surprised that they actually did that. They probably did it to make room for whatever, 3D graphics or whatever is in this thing. It's a Ryzen, a Radeon graphics APU. But yeah, I'm still amazed because I'm not sure people realize that modern computers are still basically capable of running DOS natively, DOS from 1981 or 82 on a brand new computer, which is kind of amazing. I actually, that blows me away that even works.
How dare AMD remove backwards compatibility for a 40-year-old video card? Damn them.
I think the VGA was still working. Like if it was a 256 color game, that works. Or like 640 by, like I was able to run Duke Nukem and that worked fine. But it wouldn't run anything of the older stuff without the garbage on screen. But I ran it on my ThinkPad, which is probably 5 years old, and that works perfectly. Like I was running DOS Outrun, Beep Speaker works, CGA works, everything works perfectly. I booted FreeDOS off a thumb drive on that thing.
Very cool. Very cool. So who else has got? Noel, do you have anything planned for DOS Sember?
Yeah, I was planning on taking care of this laptop that I had around. So this is one of the early Amstrad laptops that it's like barely laptop portable, although not as bad as some of those really, really early ones.
The luggables.
Yeah, it's not a luggable, but it's like almost. And so I just wanted to have a look at it. I'm usually, it's not the kind of computer I do in my channel. I do more like 8-bit computers and that kind of thing. But this one was sent to me by a friend a while ago. And apparently, he loves Amstrad laptops and he has tons of them. And apparently this is a particularly unusual one because it has a hard drive, and these laptops never had a hard drive. So I don't know if there's like some aftermarket that somebody installed it or something. So I think it's going to be interesting, just both trying to repair it and then seeing what it's going on inside and what can we do with it, and also maybe looking at the historical perspective of this laptop. When did it come out and what was it competing against? So I don't know, it could be interesting. I'm sure I'm going to be learning a lot of new things just by looking at it.
No, at least you could say that it's an XT class machine, those Amstrad. So you say it's 8-bit data bus, so it's sort of 8-bit.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Is that the one with the washed out LCD screen?
Yeah, it's the flip
that's barely
screen.
readable.
Yeah. And this flips up, and this particular one, the hinges are not even holding it up, so you flip it up and it just flips back down. And maybe using some of that baking soda and super glue to make a hinge.
I think I saw somebody putting in a more modern LCD into the thing, and he used that MCE to VGA adapter from Serta Shop. I think he kind of embedded it in the thing to get VGA graphics. So
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, there is a monitor output on. I have one of those, that same computer. It has a CGA external monitor connector. So yeah, you could totally use that.
I actually, I really, so I'd like unusual computers, especially unusual form factors. And I actually really like luggables. And I've got kind of two in my collection. I've got my TRS-84P, but I've got a portable 2, compact portable 2. And there's two things I love about that computer. One is because there's such a small CRT in them, it makes everything super crispy. And it's actually got a CGA compatible card in it. And I've said for a while now that the best way of viewing CGA graphics is actually in monochrome, or, at least grayscale or green scale, as the case may be. But the other thing is and I've never actually pulled the whole thing apart to see what kind of hard drive is in it. But this compact portable of mine has the best sounding hard drive. And that's one of the main things I love about that computer is this awesome sounding hard drive. And the crispy CRT grayscale CGA graphics. I just think it's just an awesome machine. I love it.
I think that was really cool about all those old compacts is they had that video card and the monitor that was dual MDA and shades of green or amber, depending on what you had. That was unusual at the time. That was the true. I don't know if that was the first multi-sync monitor there was, to be honest, because it actually changed scan rate depending on which standard you were using. So early on, that was pretty advanced.
But it was also the best way of viewing CGA.
It was. You weren't looking at the pukey colors or the purple and the cyan.
No, it actually looked really good on the small, crispy, just green screen. Green screen. It was kind of cool. Who else have we got? Dave made it back. Dave doesn't have a video, but he's been happily listening in. Or have you come up with some cool idea? Oh, wait, I could do this.
No, I haven't thought of anything yet.
We've just been giving you ideas this whole phone call. Lack of time, I'm guessing. Lack of time.
Jace, I was going to say something. I recently went to a recycler here in Portland, a place that scraps computers, and they had a bunch of stuff. So one of the machines I found, it was this weird little coffee maker computer. Unfortunately, it's in the other room, so I can't grab it, but it looks like a coffee maker, and it was made by Daewoo, I think. It's called a Quirim or something. From a side view, it looks like a blender, like the bottom of a blender without the top part on it. But yet it's a Pentium 3 machine, so it's kind of unusual. So I think I may have to show that just because of the oddity factor of it, even though it's just a boring P3 machine.
Yeah. But it's an odd looking machine. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's garbage.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was a really cool looking machine. Mark has returned. I think we're about it. And if anyone's got any other projects that for December that we haven't gotten to, raise your hand.
I would have the project I originally planned. I could.
Okay. Sorry. Oh, that's right. You actually had a real project. Sorry.
I had a project planned. I made up my mind about stuff. I actually have a Commodore PC-10 2 that needs some repairs, and I planned on doing that. I think David made a video about some of the Commodore PC models.
Yep.
And they are quite nice actually, and they were made in Germany for the most part, I think. And yeah, that would be quite fitting. But maybe I'm doing both. I think I like the Amiga Bridgeboard idea a bit better even.
Yeah, Jan, I was wondering. So because the Commodore Germany made all those PCs, are they plentiful and easy to find in Germany?
They are. We actually had them at school. The school computers were actually Commodore PCs, and that was really common here.
But they're not that easy to find now, I think, because I'm from Belgium, and I mean, you sometimes see them popping up, these kind of Commodore PCs, but not very often.
I wonder if it was the same thing as with the Apple IIs in the United States. Like they were just all trashed at some point, probably.
Yeah, like they were school/business machines and not home computers. Interesting.
I've always been kind of curious about, I mean, because everyone, you put out, you show a Commodore PC compatible, and people just kind of go, huh? And yeah, they all seem to come out of at the time, West Germany. So I'm just always been curious, was it another example of one of the international branches of Commodore doing their own thing, or?
That's exactly what they did.
I mean, we know all the stories of the UK arm of Commodore going, no, don't do that, don't do that, while Commodore America drove the place into the ground. Was this another example of like Commodore West Germany kind of going, guys, you know, DOS is the future, we really need to get in on this, and just doing their own thing?
Yeah, that's what they did, actually. It was actually, they did it kind of in secret. They decided to have a line of PCs and then just had that all laid out and planned, and then presented the central of the Commodore headquarters with it. And they kind of liked the idea because they already sold them, and they sold quite well. I think that's what's the book Commodore Company on the Edge. I think that's in one of the books. It's also pretty much the story is told by somebody who was there at the time. And that was exactly what they did. They just developed a PC line, and they sold well, so they could sell the idea to Commodore headquarters, and they went with it because they didn't. The other computers at the time didn't sell that well, actually, and they didn't quite know what to do.
Yeah, it seems
point
like,
out
that
David, the Commodore Colt was sold here in retail stores. I actually remember service merchandise, particularly as a kid. I would walk in and see the Commodore Colt on the shelf being sold there. So I know the PCs were sold here to the consumer at some point.
Yep, they were sold here in Australia too.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny though. Like I don't think I've ever. I mean, other than on YouTube channels now, I have never seen a Commodore PC in person. So they couldn't have been that common. But
same here. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen any of the Atari PCs in person either.
Oh, that's right. There were those too.
Those I think are some pretty hen's teeth machines.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Commodore Germany, though, really was, I mean, I think they were successful selling Commodore machines as a whole, as a business computer, you know, starting with the PET and all those various successor lines. And it sort of makes sense that they would kind of parlay that into PC, DOS-compatible machines, just as obviously that's the way the entire world was going, while Commodore USA was really focused on, you know, gaming for the most part and trying to relive the days of the C64.
With their head buried in the sand. Okay, cool. I think we've managed to kind of get through everyone. We've been going.
I got one more idea.
Oh, right.
I'll run by you. Yeah.
Okay. No. Go.
I've been looking for an excuse to kind of bring my entire IBM XT family together, because I have like the IBM PC, the XT, the Luggable, the AT. So I have a whole bunch of them completely set up. And now I finally have the space to kind of set them all up next to each other. So I've been thinking about doing some kind of networking video, MS-DOS networking video, how it was done in the old days. So I'm also thinking about doing something like that.
So you're gonna like set up a Noel server?
Something like that. Yeah.
I was just gonna say it's got to be non-TCP/IP, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
I can go ArcNet or coaxial, so I have a whole box of networking cards.
Token ring, if you really want to go retro.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So perhaps look into that.
When I first saw Noel Network back in the day, that was working at that computer store, and I just remember like, oops, I unplugged like one of the connections off the back of a T, and the whole network went down.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, sorry, everyone.
Sorry.
Do not miss those days.
Yeah, it was the same at LAN parties. You know, the poor guy that had to leave early, who was in the middle of the coax network. So.
Righto. thank you very much for everyone joining us for this quick chat about DOS Sember and our history and our background in DOS. I think that will probably do it for this call officially, at least when it comes to the recording of it. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, those from all over the planet, and thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. It's been a lot of fun.
And that is going to be it. Thank you to all the YouTubers who participated in the Zoom call. It was absolutely a blast. And don't forget to check the description below to see a link to all of the YouTubers' channels who are participating in December and watch for their upcoming videos. Thanks very much for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.